hit you with the let me hit you with the bleep blue. Let me hit you with the
The way that you make me feel like I've never been felt before. Look in your eyes, I found the one I've been waiting for. I'm feeling electric. All of it's electric. The way that you make me feel like I've never been felt before. I'm feeling electric. Look in your eyes, I found the one I've been waiting for. I'm feeling electric. The way that you make me feel like I've never been felt before. Look in your eyes, I found the one I've been waiting for. I'm feeling electric. All of it's electric. The way that you make me feel like I've never been felt before. I'm feeling electric. In your eyes, I found the one I've been waiting for.
It's like
What's up everyone, and welcome back to the preseason. In this video, I want to talk to you all about settings. Now, the reason settings are so important and the reason we're dedicating a whole video to this in the preseason is because settings are something that are really sticky. Once you get them and once your muscle memory starts to build, it's really annoying, and honestly it takes a long time to ever change them if you have to. But at the same time, in a game like Rocket League where the mechanics are so important, settings are something that you want to have down from the start. Now, me personally, I've had to change settings 2 or 3 times in my 6 years of Rocket League, and so this video is basically the cumulative knowledge of everything I know about settings and all the mistakes I've made. That way you can get your settings, your keybinds, and all that stuff straight away from the start. You never have to worry about changing it in the future, and you don't have to deal with the stress of relearning stuff like I had to. Once again, since this is the GCR, the whole purpose of this is to consolidate everything I know into one organized place for you all. So this video is basically going to be my master settings guide, better than any settings guide I have on my YouTube channel. And I'm going to go rapid fire through literally every setting, how I've updated over time, and what you should actually do as you enter the program. 2 admin things before we get started. 1, I recommend you pull up Liquipedia while you watch this. Liquipedia is basically just a database of all the most common pro settings. I'll be referencing it a lot, and you can use it to kind of split test your own settings, if that makes sense. And then number 2, I'm going to be going through literally every setting. So I'll have timestamps down in the description below that you can basically jump between. And I'm going to assume that if you're watching this, you are somewhere between plat and champ entering. And so a lot of my feedback is going to be based on that. I'll let you know in the video when my advice differs based on rank. With all that out of the way, let's just get started. Let's jump into my settings and let's cover each one in order so you're ready to go for day 1. starting, first tab, gameplay. Really, the gameplay tab, there's not much you're going to have to worry about. You want all your speeds set to high, client send rate, server send rate, bandwidth limit, all that. Before I've tried PS5. I recommend you use PS4 and use CSTS. That's what I found the best results with. PS4 controller, PS4 side, all that stuff. You can experiment with input things, and let's cover each one in order so you're ready to go for day one. You want all your speeds set to high, client send rate, server send rate, bandwidth limit, all that stuff. You can experiment with input buffer. Just a little aside, input lag is really, really important in Rocket League, and I've found personally the lowest input lag when I play on PS4 controller. That's just me. I've tried Xbox, I've tried PS4, I've tried PS5. I recommend you use PS4 and you use CSTS. That's what I found the best results with. But some people have said default or STS works just fine. I think you should just use CSTS and PS4 if you can. That's really all you have to worry about for the gameplay tab. For the camera tab, camera settings, basically how you view the game, of course, you probably know this. Camera settings are pretty much cracked. I'll give you the most common ranges on Wikipedia that all the pros use, as well as mine. First off, camera preset. If you do have Bacchus mod, this is one thing you can check really easily. You'll have access to, they just added this recently, you'll have access to all of the pro settings. So you can literally click and see and get like presets made of exactly what the pros use and get those applied. Personally, I recommend you just use stock settings, but if you want to experiment with, you know, Justin's or, you know, whoever's, you can use the camera preset tab. But speaking from my experience, camera shake, of course, just turn this off. Field of view. Field of view, this is basically cracked. You should use 110. Some pros are starting to popularize like 108, 109 field of view. Field of view just controls how much of the actual like screen you can see, like how wide your field view is. Just max it out. It's the best way to go. Distance, meta range for this is between 260 and 280. I recommend you just put it on 270, but you can experiment with what you like. Height is the exact same thing. Meta range is between 90 and 110. Once again, I use the middle. I recommend you just use the middle as well. 100. Angle. Meta range for the angle is -3 to -5. However, the more and more I've played, the more I've come to appreciate lower camera angles. Musty uses a -3. Most pros use -4. Since I play mainly 1s and 2s, an angle of -3 is really nice for me. But if you play more 3s, I would recommend a higher angle, because basically what angle controls is how much up and down of the field you see. In 1v1, it's really nice to just have that zoomed in view, whereas in 3v3, it's nice to see more of what's going on in the air. So higher if you're a mainly 3v3 player, lower if you're mainly 1v1 or 2v2 player. -3 to -5 is the meta range. Stiffness, this is purely preference based. I've seen a lot of like different commentary on this. Lethamyr, for example, uses a max stiffness of 1. So basically when he drives, his car doesn't shrink at all based on how fast he's going. If you use 0, your car will shrink and like time warp, let's say. Like it'll scale up and down based on how fast you're going heavily when you're down on 0 stiffness. I recommend you just go straight in the middle because it's purely preference. You can experiment with that. I just use 0.5. Swivel speed, I recommend you max this out. This is how quickly your camera looks around, and I think it's nice to be able to look around super quick. Transition speed, this is how quickly you switch between car cam and ball cam. Some people like high transition speed. I think you'll get motion sickness if you use really high. I recommend 1.0 or 1.1. Honestly, I just use 1.0. And then finally, invert swivel. I recommend you turn this on. This basically just makes it so that when you push down on the joystick, you actually look down. And when you push up, you actually look up. I recommend invert swivel. It makes more intuitive sense. So yeah, those are my camera settings. If you have any questions, you can of course talk to people in the server. But I recommend you just kind of copy and paste camera settings. You don't have to think too much about it. Controls, on the other hand, this is where things start to diverge. We'll talk about sensitivity first, then we'll talk about bindings. This is probably the most important part of the video. It's going to be the most custom to you, so pay attention to this. Let's start with steering and aerial sensitivity. So just like in a shooter where sensitivity controls, you know, how quickly you have to move your mouse around to sense, it's the same thing in Rocket League. Steering and aerial sensitivity is how far you have to move your joystick for a certain amount of output to be registered. So it's like the input to output ratio. Here's what I recommend. The lower rank you are, the more important just basic consistency is, and the less important speed is. So at the lower ranks, I recommend you start with a lower steering and aerial sensitivity. a good range to start at is anywhere between 1.0 and 1.4. Now, as you rank up, and if you look on Wikipedia, you'll see that steering and aerial sensitivities have started to rise in the pro scene. My theory is because the game is getting much faster, and quick recoveries are becoming much more important. So my recommendation is, as you get more mechanical and as you rank up, you increase your steering and aerial sensitivities. You'll see mine are closer to the 2.0 range. I found that 2.0 is kind of the max I can control, so I use 2.0 steering and 2.0 aerial. But I recommend, if you're lower rank, you start out in that 1 to 1.2 range, and as you get better and better, you increase your sensitivity. I will mention, and this is kind of interesting, there was a study done. FlowStateGG talks about it in one of his videos. Basically, the study was done on the topic of subtle variance. And what subtle variance is the effects of changing sensitivity minorly, just minor adjustments on actual muscle memory, how quickly your I guess hands or your muscle memory develops in a game. What they found in this like clinically researched study was subtle variance, so oscillating your sensitivity up and down a little bit as you play the game over long periods of time actually improves your control. They did this with, technically it was with a shooter. It wasn't with Rocket League. They oscillated players' mouse sensitivities as they trained this aim trainer game. And they found that the people who they oscillated got the muscle memory down faster than those who didn't. So this is once again why I recommend you slowly increase it over time. If that study holds, if there's nothing that refutes it, it's kind of interesting. So anyways, steering aerial, work it up as you go. Start at 1.0 and increase it because there's might be benefits to doing it. Finally, the only other control setting besides sensitivity that's important is dead zone. In fact, dead zone is like sensitivity on steroids. Basically, dead zone controls how far you have to move the joystick from the center to register an input. And so if you adjust this just a little bit, you'll feel a big difference in your game. Once again, just like with sensitivity, where like beginners, I say start lower, so that way it's easier to control and you can learn it. Dead zone is the same thing. The higher your dead zone is, the slower the input will be picked up, which means the better, I say, for beginners. So if you're a beginner, start high, and as you get better, you work this down. So ultimately your goal should be to work down from like 0.10. 0.05 is the most common. Important note, dead zone seems to affect Xbox and PS4 controllers very differently. From what I've seen in the competitive scene, PS4 players almost always use very low dead zones, whereas Xbox players sometimes use higher dead zones, like closer to like 0.10, even 0.20. So if you are an Xbox player, it may be warranted to use a higher dead zone, but if you're PS4 or like most people, I recommend trying to get to around 0.05 over time for controller dead zone. I hope that's not too confusing. Dodge dead zone, this is more preference. Basically, it controls how far you have to move your stick to initiate a dodge, to register a dodge. The only real application of this at the lower ranks is to protect you from accidentally backflipping when you fast aerial. Basically, if you increase this really high, you can pull down and fast aerial easier without having to worry about accidentally backflipping on that second jump, if that makes sense. So like newer players sometimes like to have this higher, around like 0.8 I've seen the highest, but meta range is like between 0.4 and 0.8. I land in the middle. I use 0.5. Finally, controller vibration, just disable this. And then mouse sensitivity and keyboard sensitivity. To be honest, I played KBM for like my first 400 hours, but I don't know. This is the point in the video where I just say, go check out the GCR Discord if you're KBM and find somebody else who's KBM, and you can team up and make a friend and you can help each other out, because I don't have the expertise to talk about KBM. Okay, that is section 2. That's control settings. Now we're moving on to the final, like actually important section of this video, besides like a couple bonus stuff I'll go over at the end, and that is bindings. Key bindings are incredibly important in Rocket League. Why? Because as you get to the higher ranks, you need to do many inputs at the same time. At the start, when you just start playing, all you really need to do is like jump and front flip and boost sometimes. But as you get better, you're gonna have to air roll while you jump, while you flip. You need to have all those buttons down. So what are my bindings? My bindings personally are Rizzo's controls. So I use my joystick to drive instead of having an accelerate and a decelerate button. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just different. I'd recommend you just stay stock and you use like normal accelerate and decelerate buttons. But the real things that matter are jump, boost, air roll, and power slide. If at all possible, you want to make it so you can jump, boost, power slide and directional arrow left or arrow right, at the same time. Meaning, like, you really don't want to have jump, boost, air roll, and power slide all on whatever this section of the controller is called. Whatever this area is, you don't want to have all 4 of those buttons there. The most important things that you can do are jump, boost, and air roll all at the same time. So what I do is I put my boost on the back of my controller, and I put my power slide on the back of my controller as well. I recommend you put both of those things in the back. Now, some people have gotten away with only putting power slide on the back of their controller, and they keep boost on like circle or on something in this section next to their jump and their directional arrow. I don't think that's ideal, just because you have to fat finger to be able to do all 3 at the same time. It's really hard. If you look at Wikipedia, you can find common pro keybinds to copy. Some pros just fat finger and they have boost and jump right next to each other, just like they're set on the default controls. That's fine. It's just a little bit harder. You can learn to get away with it just fine, but if you're brand new and you really don't have the muscle memory built up, put boost on the back of your controller. That's what we're seeing more commonly with a lot of newer pros coming in the scene, and I think it's just easier to navigate. Once you have that checked off and you can jump, boost, air roll, and power slide all at the same time, the only real other tip that I can give you with controls is make sure that your neutral air roll is on the same button as your power slide. That way, when you're like doing wave dashes or half flips or recoveries, it's all just binded to one button, and you can seamlessly transition from the ground to the air. Basically, you know, joystick air roll only happens in the air, power slide only happens on the ground. Might as well throw them on the same button. If you didn't know that, do that. And yeah, apart from that, controls aren't too deep. I mean, a lot of controls actually don't matter. I really don't use like reverse cam or anything like that. I really only use camera pitch. Like, I only really look around my camera. I don't use reverse cam. The only other thing is make sure you pick one directional air roll, because we will be training directional air roll inside the program. As you get through Plat, Diamond, and Champ, directional air roll does become really important. If you don't know how to think about this, or if this is a little intimidating, don't worry. We'll talk about it more in the program. But basically, the way I see it is joystick air roll is the air roll that you want to use on the ground. It's going to be used for like air roll shots, recoveries, basically short-term aerials, just like little adjustments. And then directional air roll is what you're going to use for long-term aerials. Think air dribbles, flip resets, really complicated aerial mechanics. That's what directional air roll is going to be good for. I'll talk about this more in future videos. I'll probably talk about this more. You can work with mechanics coaches on this as well. But yeah, pick a button. You're going to want a button for air roll left or air roll right. It doesn't matter which one it is. I recommend you put them on one of these 2 buttons here, either square or circle on PS4. Hopefully whoever's editing can translate that to Xbox. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I hope this is not too boring, because we're almost at the end, and this stuff is actually important, so I'll do my best to wrap it up quick here. Finally, for interface, really most of this stuff doesn't matter at all. The only thing that matters here is that you increase your nameplate skill, because the higher nameplate skill, the easier it's going to be to spot opponents. Yeah, that's really all to say there. And the last important section is, of course, video settings. Video settings actually matters a lot. If you're watching this and you're in the program, I'm going to assume you're a comp player and that you're not a freestyler. If you're a freestyler, half of these settings don't apply to you. But if you're a comp player, listen up. This is what you want, and this is what I've learned from a lot of playing. For resolution, you want to have this on 1080p, if at all possible, if you have a 1080p monitor, because you just want pixels to be crisp. You want to be able to, differentiate the ball from the wall or the other player when you're looking downfield at a long distance. And very importantly, you want your display mode to be on full screen and your VSync to be off. This is because full screen is the least latency method to play. That makes sense. And having VSync off will also give you the least latency, specifically in terms of input lag. Input lag, incredibly important, like we were talking about. You want your movements to be snappy, so plan full screen, play with VSync off, thank me later. Trust me, this is what you want. And then for visual settings, once again, I'm going to assume you're a sweaty comp player, so you're going to want to put render quality on high. That way you can differentiate those pixels at long distance and get really precise reads. But you want your render detail to be on performance. And what that's basically going to do, it's going to turn all your advanced settings on the right side of my screen here to performance. So that way you see everything in high resolution, but there's no fancy strobe lights or lighting that's going to get in your way. That's like the sweaty comp way to play. That's how you see all the pros playing. And FPS, you want to turn this as max, the highest that your monitor can output. Technically, my monitor can only output 240, but I get slightly less input lag when I play 360, and you can check this by just hitting F10 on your keyboard and seeing what your computer can output. When I'm in free play here, my computer can output like more than 240. As you can see, it's like 300, and that's mostly because I'm recording. If I wasn't recording, it'd be outputting even higher. So I increased it to 360, even though my monitor can only output 240, just to reduce my input lag. I really care a lot about that at the high ranks. It shouldn't matter for you too much. Put it at 240, put it at 360, or uncap it if you literally have like a 3090 Ti or just the top stuff. Yeah, that's basically my feedback. You can test using the F10 shortcut and see what your PC is able to output, but I just recommend 360 or 240. Sweet. Apart from that, I think that covers it, guys. You can bind chat shortcuts if you want to be able to tell your teammates that you're going back right or back left on kickoffs. That's really the only thing I use it for. I use it for on your left and on your right. Apart from that, all this stuff is personal preference. I hope that helps. That was me going rapid fire through all the controls and all the settings possible. If you have any questions, absolutely go ask some of the mechanics coaches in the Discord. They're going to know this stuff best, but really anybody in the community should be able to help you out. Yeah, if this was your first time hearing me talk about settings, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was as speedy as possible for you. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll sign off and let you move on to the last step or two of the preseason, because I'm sure you already have your work cut out for you learning this stuff now. But yeah, that should cover it. Also, Luke from the future here, and one final message before you leave. I just want to emphasize, learning keybinds or relearning keybinds is really hard. And so if after this video you're thinking about whether or not you should change your keybinds, know that no matter what you do, it's not going to be easy, but in the long term it will be worth it. I've changed my keybinds like 2 or 3 times, but once I did, after like the first 3-week learning curve, it'll take about 21 days from my experience to commit this stuff to muscle memory. You're going to be so thankful. If you're in it for the long term, peel off the band-aid right now, get good keybinds, get good controller settings. You will thank yourself later. Cool. Thanks so much for watching. I'm actually going to hand it over to Polar to run you guys through the mechanics checklist, one of the final steps before launch day. And until then, good luck, happy training, and I'll catch you all very, very soon. Peace, guys.
Who's watching?
Yo, what's up guys, and congratulations on reaching this video. I'm super excited because in this video, I'm basically going to be going over my top 5 strat to get Grand Champ with 0 mechanics. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because, as many of you know, I'm currently recording my Road to SSL series over on YouTube, and the goal of that series is to get up to Grand Champ with basically not using any mechanics. And since I've got such positive feedback on that one, I basically wanted to follow it up and kind of summarize everything that's going on in that series into one video for you guys here. That way it's super condensed and you actually get some actionable stuff you can go take into your games to help you rank up. Once again, this is going to be a private training, so I'm just planning on releasing this to the people in my Discord. I'm not going to be posting this anywhere else, but if you do find this valuable, definitely feel free to share the link and get the word out. If you're new here and you don't know who I am, what's up? My name's Luke. I'm an almost SSL Rocket League creator as well as coach. I've coached over 1,600 players, so I'm not going to hold anything back. This is literally what I teach to people. Without any further ado, let's jump into the strats. Okay, so strategy number 1 is learning a series of boost pads I like to call the back post lane. Basically, the back post lane or the rainbow path or the short hook, there are many different names for it, is just this sort of crescent formation of boosts that wrap around your net. Now, the reason it's so beneficial to learn how to follow this boost lane and just make it muscle memory is because one of the problems I see a lot at the lower ranks is people defending on, say, low boosts from the middle of their net. The reason defending from your middle of the net or even from the front post is bad because when you push up too far on defense, you leave a lot of the net behind you. And basically, your goal as a defender should always be to keep the net in front of you. When you rotate along this back post lane properly, what happens is you have the entire net in front of you to defend from. And you'll see one of the main strategies I use that helps me save like 90% of shots that come from the lower rank is just sticking back post and keeping the net in front of me no matter what. You'll notice I'm always very hesitant to push up into my corners, and I really try not to sit inside my net to defend, because when you do that, you make defending much harder because you don't have as much space to read the attacker. You have to kind of guess which side they're going to shoot on, and sometimes you'll have to turn your car around, make backward saves. It's just awkward, right? So the more you can get this back post lane down, the more comfortable you'll be on defense and the harder it'll be to score on you. You'll basically always be at least 50 or 60 boosts. And if whenever you don't know what to do on defense, you just make it a habit to follow this lane, get to the back post, put the net in front of you, and kind of reassess the play, you'll basically always be in a good decision at the lower ranks, even when things get awkward. Learn the back post lane, rotate along it so that way the net's always in front of you, and don't get caught cheating up into the corners or pushing up too far. I swear, just sticking back post and following this lane will help you rank up massively below Grand Champ. Number 2, the second strategy that has been a game changer that you may have seen in my series is something I like to call corner forcing. Basically, the idea with corner forcing is I want you to think about the Rocket League pitch as a sort of heat map. Instead of thinking of the pitch as just the enemy goal is where I want the ball to be, and
all this shit is gone. Oh, so bad.